as I've said this before, it's always instructive where leaders go in the last week of a campaign, and in particular the last 24 hours on the road. So for the last time in campaign 2022, let's hear from our two travelling journalists. Jonathan Lee is with the opposition leader in Melbourne, and Andrea Crothers has been with the Prime Minister for much of the day in Perth. John, I will start with you. Breakneck speed today, unusually for the Labor campaign. Anthony Albanese started off in Adelaide. The key marginal seats of Boothby and Sturt copped a visit. Then a pit stop down in Bass in Tasmania. You're now finally in Melbourne. Looks like he's actually campaigning like he means it. Perhaps he's been listening to you. Talk us through his day and the final pitch.
Well, Peter, good evening to you. It certainly was his biggest, his busiest, and probably Anthony Albanese's best day today. The travelling media pack. We had the break with convention last night and yesterday when Mr Albanese stayed the night in Sydney and we were in Canberra. We effectively boarded the bus at 5 o'clock this morning. It was an early checkout. We headed straight to Adelaide. He caught up with Julia Gillard, the 27th Prime Minister, having a coffee date or a coffee catch-up with a man who wants to be the 31st Prime Minister. Fascinating, because the better part of 10 years ago, he was telling Julia Gillard that he was withdrawing his support for her and backing Kevin Rudd. Of course, they were university friends and they still remain friends. She stood alongside him today. And there was a special message for women out there saying that this is the Prime Minister that you want to elect. That was unmissable. And there was also a very human moment for Anthony Albanese. We've talked before and talked about how combative the press conferences have been for both leaders. But there was a moment today talking about just how proud his mother would be, a single mother, knowing that her son, potentially tomorrow, could end up becoming the Prime Minister of this great nation. It is certainly a moment of egalitarianism when we look at where we all come from and what we can achieve on both sides of politics. Mr Albanese left Adelaide and we went in a whistle-stop tour to Tasmania, the seat of Bass, the nation's second most marginal seat. I tell you, we were on the ground there for less time than it takes to eat your lunch on the plane, Peter. It was in and out in probably 6 or 7 minutes. We departed. He spoke very, very briefly to the media, and we're now heading back, or we're now back in Melbourne. So a fascinating day, a very, very busy day. And when Mr Albanese was with the students today and campaigning alongside Julia Gillard at a school in South Australia, he was genuinely mobbed. It was one of the rare moments that wasn't carefully crafted and cultivated, which we've seen both leaders throughout this campaign. Anything could have happened. It played very well for him. The optics were very good. It's a shame we haven't seen more of that from both leaders throughout the campaign.
Yeah, I'll echo your point there about his remarks about his mother. I thought they were very poignant, and I think life after politics certainly suits Julia Gillard. I thought she looked terrific today. I don't agree with her position on many things, but I thought she looked great. Give me a sense of the mood inside the Labor camp. I rang a lot of my Labor contacts today. The hard heads are quietly, fingers crossed, confident. Those a bit more bullish are those with less campaign experience, I think, less scarred by last time round. What's the mood there with you?
There was a bit of poise to Mr Albanese today. He didn't look edgy, he didn't look nervous, he looked comfortable, amongst the most comfortable we've seen all campaign. You get the feeling that internally the polls are good and he's on track for a win. He wanted to keep the damage to a minimum, but he did well today, and you get the feeling that that's going to happen.
All right, we'll leave it there for a moment. Let's go to the West now. The Prime Minister spent the day key marginals in Perth, which of course the Coalition desperately need to hold if they want to hold government tomorrow. Andrea Crothers was with the Prime Minister and she's filed this report.
On the eve of the election, Scott Morrison focused his campaign on Western Australia. His blitz of must-hold marginal seats shows just how crucial the state is if he is to snag a second term, spending time in 3 the Liberals need to keep and 1 they want to win, Labor-held Cowan. Labor is quietly confident of picking up Swan and Pearce, capitalising on the retirements of outgoing MP Steve Irons and former Attorney General Christian Porter. And if the swing is on, they're hopeful of their chances in Hasluck too, held by Morrison Government Minister Ken Wyatt. Down in the polls and at risk of being booted out, Scott Morrison says this election isn't about rewarding or punishing a leader, instead framing it as a contest on the economy. It's a strategy that led him to victory in 2019. But things have changed since then. Australians have faced natural disasters, a pandemic and a rising cost of living.
It all comes down to one thing, and that is a strong economy. And that's why this election is all about who was best able to manage our economy, who was best able to manage the nation's finances.
After 6 weeks of campaigning, this is it. Scott Morrison may know tomorrow if it has all paid off, but if the race is tight, he might just have to wait a little longer.